Hello everyone, Matt from Ordnance here, and welcome back to the workbench for another unboxing. This time I'm taking a look at this, the Skyraider AD-5 or A-1E in 1/48 scale. So join me as I take a look inside this box and see what this kit is like. So on the front, rather exciting image of the Skyraider taking off from a aircraft carrier. A little bit cartoony, but still pretty nice to look at nonetheless. It is manufactured by Revell, and it says that there's one plastic kit in the box and there's a skill level of 2. This is giving me ever so slight like monogram vibes based off of what we experienced with the F-82 I looked at a little bit previously. We do have on the back a introduction to skill levels, but these are not the same kind of skill levels that we would expect to see from Revell Germany. So this is getting a slight like Revell USA kind of feel to it. But if we look over here, we do actually have a Revell Germany address over here. What I'm going to do is look onto the thin edge very briefly. We do have an item code over here of 85-5327, and the other side has the same information, so there's nothing really of note other than helping you identify it on the shelf. On this edge though, we do have a copyright date of 2013, but a copyright date doesn't always indicate a tooling date, so take that with a pinch of salt. We do have some nice images of a built example, which I really like. I like seeing this on the box because it gives you something to sort of aspire to, something to replicate. We do have two paint schemes annotated here, telling you two different variants. So actually this one's painted in blue, and these two, that's a sort of, that one's a light grey one, and then we've got a camouflage one there. So that would lead me to believe that there are three paint schemes included in the box. We do have production information. So we have parts were made in Poland, it was packaged in the USA, printing was done in China, and decals come from Italy. So this is all over the place. But it does feel very much like this is a Revell America product. So what we're going to do, flip over to the other side. We have information about the actual kit. We have dimensions, which are in imperial measurements here. So again, striking me very much sort of monogramming kind of style. But if we look over here, we do have these centimeters in there as well. So it's 24.8 centimeters in length and 31.8 centimeters in width, or vice versa, depending on how good my French is. We do have information about the actual Skyraider, and we have some information about what's included in the kit. So we should have pilot figures, flaps and folding wings, and landing gear, which can be put up or down. But obviously I think you have to pick one, you glue it in place, it's not going to be operational as such. And then over here we do have recommended paint colors, but these are just names of paints, so use whichever brand you want. And that is pretty much the outside of the box. So let's quickly get inside and see what we have in here. As you can see, the box is a touch big for what we've got. A big box does result in parts moving around and could cause damage, which would be a bit of a shame. But we will look at the instructions. So the instructions are, yeah, they're giving me sort of monogram vibes here, or sort of Revell America. Black and white image at the top. It looks like it's going to be all in black and white. Turn over the page. We have our paint guide here, and everything is named but also given a letter, which is quite similar to how Revell Germany do things. We have a key to the symbols down here for what we expect to see, and then we have part names. So every part on the sprue has got a name. Typically you would see a sprue map, but in this case we've got names, which I mean is interesting. I suppose that gives a little bit of historical information about what each part of the aircraft might be. That carries on to the second page. So it looks like there's 87 parts included. And then we come to our assembly instructions. And these are quite nice and clear to follow. Step one on this page is actually a lot of steps. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's like 6 steps in here for step one. So it's almost like page one with loads of stuff on it. We have cockpit details with decals that need to be applied. We build up our cockpit. We have a pilot figure which goes on his chair. We do that 3 times because there are 3 of them. Well, 3 crew. I presume a pilot, co-pilot, and some sort of like weapons operator or navigator. And then we flip over. Our cockpit gets glued inside of our fuselage, and the fuselage joined. This looks potentially like the landing gear bay there. And then we have tail surfaces which get joined together and then added to the model. I think that says don't glue it in, so you could have sort of a bit of play value with your rudder being movable, but the elevators aren't, so what value that really provides, I don't know. Then we come on to our sort of inner wings, so this is our upper and lower being joined, and then our outer wings, upper and lower, being joined. And here, the way they've designed the kit is that if you get these sort of mounts into the slot and then glue this part over the top, you should have freely operating wings that can be either positioned extended or raised. I wonder how good that will look. I imagine there's probably a bit of a gap, especially even when you lower it down. So if you wanted it fixed in a more realistic way, you might have to glue them together, but there is an element of play value there. We add our fuselage to our wings, and then we do our engine assembly. So the engine gets assembled in a number of components which are joined together, and the cowling is placed over the top when you've done that, and then that's installed onto your aircraft. So not a particularly undetailed kit. Then we come on to our flaps, and the flaps, I presume, can be glued. Yep, it says here, optional assembly position for flaps. You can glue them in a more raised position or a more lowered position. I might go for lowered, I don't know. Then we have wheels. Wheels get assembled. There's sort of this central part here. I wonder if that's like almost like a polycap, like how Tamiya used them. So when you mount that onto your leg, that allows the wheel to rotate freely. So again, another bit of play value. At this point, of course, you need to decide whether you want to have your landing gear raised or lowered. So if you're having it lowered, you assemble your legs, glue it into the aircraft as appropriate, and you've got a tail wheel and a rester hook to go in as well. Whereas if you want them to be raised, there are separate parts for that, which you glue in as appropriate. There is, however, what looks to be an air brake here, which you could glue in the closed or open position, I would imagine. So here, yeah, number 13 closed or open there. And then we come on to sort of ordnance. We've got drop tanks, which can be glued together. We've got bombs. They get mounted onto pylons, and then they all get installed onto the wing surfaces on these little holes. So we do have here, it indicates that if you're doing the A-1E version, you can have all of this. And if you're doing the AD-5, you can have all of this. So there are differences. You'll notice that these drop tanks, this drop tank is smaller. So on this one, they're sort of symmetrical and there's a central pylon with nothing on it. Whereas in this one, you've got big drop tank in the middle, and then the smaller one on the side, which I would have thought would have been the other way around, but interesting. And then we come to this one, and this is our clear parts being added. And if you have, depending on which variant you want to do, you've got different details, so you just need to pay attention to what you're putting on there. However, in this case, there are different guns. So if you're going for the A1, it looks like there's a potentially 20mm cannon barrel only on the inboard weapon, whereas on the AD-5, both of them have barrels, but they're slightly different. We then add our propeller onto the sort of mount on the nose, and at that point, you should be done. I think it's worth noting that this doesn't look like it could be positioned open. I'm not sure that will be designed in such a way that you could push that over the top. I'm not sure how the canopy would open on the Skyraider, actually. I don't know if it was like a foldy one or if it was a slidey one. So that's what you'd have to look into, but I think you'd need to modify that in some way to have it in an open position. So as the kit is in sort of displayed here, it appears that you can only put it on in a closed position. Then we have our painting instructions. So we've got our 1, 2, 3 paint schemes. To the best of my knowledge, oh yeah, they have. They've labelled the paint colours as well as giving them letters, which is actually a little bit more helpful than the typical Revell instructions. However, they are all in black and white, which makes things a little bit more difficult because, I mean, some of these are very similar shades, so you could potentially paint it wrong. You could get confused and think that this is actually a black aircraft, but actually it's, well, according to this, it is sea blue, it's J, but it looks awfully similar to dark green. So, you know, you just need to take a little bit of care. You could look at the box artwork and take it off of that as well. So the first one is an AD-5 in 1953, painted in all blue. The next ones are an AD-5 doesn't have a date, but I would imagine from a similar sort of time period. But this one is in a camouflage sort of green and brown color. And then the last one is an AD-5 in the 1950s, but this is a grey upper and a potentially white underneath. So yeah, 3 different paint schemes. It is worth noting that this one is the A-1E variant, but it doesn't have the, so that's interesting. It has the cannon drawn on there, but not on the top image. These have the 2 cannons there, and I think in the instructions just now it said you needed to put 1 cannon barrel in for the A-1E variant. Let's just turn the page. Yeah, so they haven't quite replicated that in the instructions, which could lead to a bit of confusion. But yeah, 3 paint schemes. I would have preferred that in color, but generally the instructions don't look too bad to follow. We will have a look at the decals, which are at the bottom of the box, protected by the tracing paper. And here we have copyright 2013. They look pretty decent. They look nice. Quite a lot of decals, bearing in mind we've got 3 paint schemes included. Looks like we've got some generics up here. These are for our canopies. I'm not a massive fan of putting transfers on canopies, but I think what I'll probably do is apply them and then put a clear gloss over the top by hand. We have our stars and bars, other small sort of detail stencils in a few places. The text is, on the larger ones, the text is legible, but on the smaller ones, they're just sort of representations, they're just blobs. Bit of a shame, because I know that other companies, even like in 72nd scale, have had smaller text than that you can read. But to be honest, I don't really mind too much. But yeah, I get the feeling from this, whilst they're all numbered, it is going to be a little bit of like hunt the decal, given how big the sheet is. But on the whole, the printing looks pretty good. The registration is all right. Everything seems to be centralized as best as possible. They don't feel overly thick. Yeah, not too bad. That leads us then on to the plastic parts, which are all contained within this bag. And I don't think I've even had the bag open. I've not been tempted to have a rummage. So this is like the first time I'm properly looking at this. Very well stuck together. So clear parts come in their own little bag, which we will have a look at first. And I've absolutely just dismantled that. Clear parts wise then, we don't get a lot. We get front canopy, sort of middle bit of the canopy, back canopy. Molded to a reasonable quality. The molding isn't particularly amazing. There is a sort of line across this one at the back here. I wonder if the light will catch that. There's also one at the front here. So they're not as clear as I would have liked. There is a slightly strange texture to it, which is, I think the light might catch that. A little bit of flash in a couple of select places, but not an overall large amount. The canopy framing is relatively proud, which means that masking this shouldn't be too difficult. And there's not that many panels. There's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 panels. So masking that should be a relatively easy job. But the molding quality and the clearness of the plastic isn't particularly great. Looking through it, it's a little bit sort of distorting the light. So seeing those details inside the cockpit is going to be not as great as if these were clearer, but they are to an acceptable and usable standard. Next, we have our sprues. We have 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 plastic sprues molded in it's an ever so slightly olivey color. It's not like a straight up gray. On here then you can see that all the parts are sort of numbered on the sprue. The plastic feels rather dense, a little bit brittle perhaps. Not much flex in it. Mold quality is moderate. There is some flash in places, like on the propeller here. There's a bit of a mold seam down some of the parts, like down the bombs. There's a mold seam. It doesn't feel overly greasy. I've had much more greasy plastic from Revell before. Figures wise then, they look usable. I have seen better figures, especially in 48 scale. We have a mold seam down the side which will need cleanup. But on the whole, this sprue doesn't look terrible. It's going to need a bit of work. The detail level is moderate, but it's not like excessive. The next one then We have sort of wing components and drop tanks. Ejector pins look to be on the inside of parts. There are some on some external surfaces which may need a bit of cleaning up. These are pylons for bombs, and you can see ejector pin marks on those. And yeah, so it's going to need a little bit of work to clean up. On this side, what we've got is cockpit details. They're not too bad. Drop tanks. The level of detail is a little bit low. We have raised panel lines and a few recessed details as well. So it's not a massively detailed kit. On this part here, there is a slight sort of scuff on the plastic, probably from the mold, where it's not been particularly well looked after. Next one then. This is our wing surfaces. We have a sticker in here with a sort of product code on it that was made in Poland. Looking through this again, ejector pin marks are quite heavy on this side. You do have your holes for your bombs and your drop tanks all molded, so if you didn't want to use some of them, you would probably have to fill those holes in. We do have some sink marks on this side here. I presume yeah, so where these parts have been molded, I think they're parts for the landing gear. Where they've been molded, we've got some sink marks that have appeared and are a little bit visible on the top surfaces. And again, where the ejector pin marks are, there are some sink marks as well. Level of detail on this side is a bit low. Raised panel lines, they're very subtle panel lines. And then we have our sort of separation between our ailerons and our main wing, and that's a recessed. It's quite thick. It's a little bit chunky. Moderate. It's looking a bit like a bit of a slightly clunky kit, isn't it? Then we come on to our main body of our aircraft. So on here we've got our fuselage halves. Again, same kind of deal. We've got some flash that needs cleaning up. On here you can see there's like some scuffs where the mold hasn't been particularly well looked after, so there's some sort of weird texture on there. We have some recessed panel lines on here, but again, there are some raised ones as well. Not particularly well detailed, a little bit chunky in some of the details as well, more like just representations of them more than anything else. We have our engine cowlings here, other drop tanks, and if we flip over, oh, look at that. Look at that, we have on there, made in England. Well, Revell doesn't make their kits in England, do they? So naturally, this is now indicating that this is not a Revell tooling. And actually, I know it's just off camera because it's right where my thumb is. If we move up to here, on the inside of this sprue, you see that there is a Lesney Products PLC matchbox with a copyright of 1908 something. So there was obviously... this is obviously a matchbox tooling, which used to be made in England and was in an 80s something, 1980 something. So it was one of the toolings that Revell managed to acquire from Matchbox. So no wonder then this is looking the way it does. Doesn't look terrible, does it? But now that we know that it's a Matchbox tooling from the 80s, things start to make a little bit more sense. But for something that's like a more modern kit, which isn't, you know, clearly annotated on the box, the age of the tooling, you would be a little bit disappointed if you picked this one up thinking it was something more modern. But yeah, so we had a number of sort of olivey grey sprues. There were 4 of them. Mold quality is moderate. Level of detail is, you know, it's not the most detailed kit in the world. But then we know now that it's an old tooling. We had a set of decals which looked to be pretty decent. We have clear parts which look to be acceptable, but they do have a few scuffs and things, and the plastic isn't overly clear. And we had our instructions, which are printed in black and white. They look to be relatively clear and easy to follow, but I would have preferred it to be in colour. However, we get 3 paint schemes included in this kit, which is absolutely fantastic because it gives us a good level of choice. All of which came contained within this box, which actually, I quite like the artwork. It doesn't look too bad, but I do like that we've got some built images on the side of the box. So as we discovered, this is a Matchbox tooling, and it actually dates from 1980 exactly, from what I can tell from looking online. So Revell acquired this at some point after the 90s, because that would appear to be the last time this was released as a Matchbox kit. I believe there is actually a monogram tooling of the Skyraider, but it represents a different version, so it's not to be confused with that one. My understanding is that the monogram version represents a Skyraider with only one crew member that can pilot it, whereas this one has three, so they're different variants. This one, by the looks of it, was first released as part of the Revell range in 2004, but the boxing I have here dates from 2013. And if we look again, we did have a copyright date of 2013. So it is very possible that this kit was manufactured around 2013. I don't think it's really been seen since, and that would explain some of the quality issues we've seen there. It's an 80s tooling, and it was manufactured quite a while ago. If you were looking at getting one of these today, I'm not sure you would be so lucky. From what I can tell online, these sort of seem to only really be available in this boxing from second-hand sellers, or if they were available at the sort of original kind of price, they're not really like around. And speaking of price, I think this must have been like on a stock clearance when I bought it, because I paid £7.50 for it, which is crazy. £7.50 for a 1/48 scale kit is absolutely insane. It was so insane to me at the time that actually I bought two. So I've got two of these. I thought they would make fun little, well, fun moderately sized builds to do, and I would do two of the paint schemes. I might do the blue one and maybe, I don't know, the camouflage one, who knows. So yeah, I bought two because, let's face it, two 1/48 scale kits for 15 quid. That's a bargain, isn't it? But if you wanted to find one of these today, I'm not so sure you would be lucky. If you did manage to find one, I'd be really apprehensive about paying more than £10 for it, given the level of quality that we've seen here. Matchbox weren't so terrible for their time, but it's definitely like not a kit that is up to modern standards. And with that, I think it's probably time to leave this one here. Let me know down in the comments what you thought of my unboxing, and if you think my assessment of this kit was fair. As always, quick shout out to my Model Club members for the extra support they give the channel. Massive thanks to these guys on screen, and if you'd like to join them or support the channel in other ways, take a look at the links in the description. The best way to support the channel for free, though, is by subscribing with notifications turned on so you never miss a modelling upload. Finally, though, last thing to say is a massive thank you to you for watching this one, and I'll catch you on the workbench again next time.